The Brooklyn heat was a physical presence, a suffocating blanket woven from asphalt fumes, stale exhaust, and the ghost of 1,000 forgotten rainstorms. It clung to the brick canyons of the heights, turning the air in my second-story office into a stagnant soup I was forced to breathe. From my window, a grimy portal to a world I was paid to observe but never touch, I watched the city sweat. Down below, the film crew scurrying around the set of Neon Seraph looked like ants on a hot plate. Their frenetic energy, a pointless charade against the crushing indifference of the afternoon sun. They were my cover, my flimsy excuse for being here, perched in this dusty roost, overlooking the gilded cage of a corporate titan named Alistair Finch. The job was as stale as the air in my office. Watch Finch's wife. He suspected her of selling company secrets to a rival. It was a boring case, the kind that paid the bills but chipped away at the soul with the slow, grinding erosion of watching privileged people invent new ways to be miserable. It was the kind of work that made a man forget what a real problem looked like. I lowered my binoculars, the rubber eye cups slick against my skin. The wife, a woman named Genevieve, sculpted by Pilates and dissatisfaction, was laughing with the film's lead actor, a preening specimen with teeth too white to be real. Her hand lingered on his arm, a fraction of a second too long. It wasn't espionage. It was a garden variety affair, waiting to happen. Another rich man paying me to confirm a truth he already knew, but was too cowardly to face. This city was built on such truths, a foundation of convenient lies and willful ignorance. That's a wrap for this scene, folks. The director's voice, tinny and distant, floated up through the open window. Lunch break. The ants scattered, their manufactured urgency dissipating in the oppressive heat, each scurrying toward a different air-conditioned hole. A low bark from the corner of the room pulled me from my surveillance. Buddy, a brindle pit bull with a head like a block of granite and eyes like melted caramel, lifted his head from his paws. His tongue lolled out, a pink flag of surrender to the temperature. I'd found him a year ago, tied to a fence in the rain behind a shuttered warehouse in Red Hook, ribs like a xylophone under his skin. His trust in the world broken into 1,000 pieces. We'd spent a year putting them back together, a painstaking process of soft words, shared meals, and the slow rebuilding of faith. Now, he was the only partner I trusted. The only living thing in this city that didn't want something from me, other than a scratch behind the ears and a share of my dinner. A few of the crew guys, mistaking my professional cover for approachability, called up. "Hey, Reeves! Deli on Atlantic. You in?" I waved them off without turning my head. "You guys go ahead. Got to take care of my partner here." My voice was flat, a tool I used to create distance, a wall to keep the world at bay. Buddy was supposed to be part of my cover story, the reclusive writer and his loyal dog, a cliche that worked precisely because it was one. The crew loved him, especially the lanky kid in charge of the film's animal actors. He'd offered to take Buddy for the break, his eagerness genuine. "It's my job, Mr. Reeves," the kid had insisted earlier, clipboard tucked under his arm like a shield. "I can take care of him, get him some water and a cool spot." "It's fine," I'd said, my voice flatter than I intended. "I'm curious what it's like to have something worth protecting." The kid had flinched and backed off, unnerved by a truth I hadn't meant to speak aloud. It was a glimpse behind the curtain, and people rarely liked what they saw there. I clipped the heavy leather leash to Buddy's collar. It was worn smooth from use, a testament to thousands of quiet walks that served as the punctuation marks in my chaotic life. I pocketed a collapsible silicone bowl and a few waste bags, remnants of a life I tried to keep orderly, even as the chaos of other people's lives paid my rent. Kneeling down, I met Buddy's gaze. the one honest mirror I owned. "Thirsty, pal," I murmured, scratching the thick muscle behind his ears. His tail gave a tentative thump against the dusty floorboards. "Yeah, I know. My fault. Forgot the water bottle." I grabbed my worn leather jacket, a second skin that held my secrets, my keys, and the compact Sig Sauer P365 nestled in its holster against the small of my back. It was too hot for the jacket, but going without it felt like walking naked into a gunfight. "See you in an hour," I called down to the thinning crowd, a meaningless courtesy. With a gentle tug on the leash, Buddy and I descended the creaking stairs and stepped out into the furnace of the Brooklyn streets, leaving the manufactured drama of the film set for the real thing. The pavement radiated heat in shimmering waves that distorted the world, making it look as cheap and flimsy as it felt. Buddy's panting grew more labored, each breath a dry rasp that grated on my nerves. My eyes, trained to see the tells, the exits, the threats, scanned for a water source. We passed a bodega with a line out the door and a high-end pet boutique where a dog in a sweater probably cost more than my monthly rent. We turned a corner off the main drag, and the anemic buzz of the heights gave way to a deeper, guttural thrum, iron and ash. The sign was old, the letters weathered, promising cheap whiskey and bad decisions. A line of chrome monsters, Harleys mostly, was parked out front, a steel barricade against the gentrified world of artisanal cheese shops and yoga studios. My hand instinctively tightened on Buddy's leash. This wasn't a place for tourists or movie crews. This was a place where trouble came to drink. A holdout from an older, meaner version of the city. Just as I was about to steer us clear, a glint of metal caught my eye. Tucked between two bikes, like an afterthought of civic duty, stood a public water fountain, a small miracle in a city that had forgotten how to give things away for free. I guided Buddy towards it, my senses on high alert, cataloging the men lounging outside. I unfolded the silicone bowl and filled it. As Buddy lapped greedily, I stepped back, letting a mountain of a man with arms like tattooed road maps use the fountain. His leather vest was patched, but clean. He wasn't one of them. I watched the patrons of Iron and Ash. They wore the same uniform, leather, denim, steel-toed boots, but their movements told different stories. Some were just guys blowing off steam after a long shift, their laughter loud but harmless. Others moved with a predator's coiled energy, their eyes constantly sweeping, cataloging, assessing. This second group, a knot of 5 or 6 of them, all wore the same patch. A snarling tiger with impossibly long claws. A new crew, aggressive, making a name for themselves with noise and intimidation. I'd heard whispers about them on the street. A crew pushing cheap fentanyl and muscle for hire. The tattooed man finished drinking and paused, his gaze falling on Buddy. A slow smile creased his weathered face. "Nice pit. People get 'em wrong." His voice was gravel, smoothed by years of road dust and cheap cigarettes. "Same as us, you know. Treat 'em right, they're loyal till the end. Cross 'em, well." He left the rest unsaid, a shared understanding passing between two men who knew that loyalty was a rare and valuable currency. "More than meets the eye," I agreed, giving him a curt nod. He understood the unspoken language of reputation and respect. He gave Buddy one last, appreciative look before swinging a leg over his bike and roaring off down the street. A waitress appeared at the door, her apron stained, her face etched with a fatigue that went bone deep. But she lit up when she saw Buddy. She knelt, her movements wary but genuine, and offered the back of her hand. Buddy, whose judgment of character was better than mine on my best day, responded with a gentle lick, his tail starting a slow, hopeful wag. "He's a handsome boy," she said, scratching behind his ears. She leaned closer, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. Kinder than half the monsters in there. I'll tell you that for free. I gave a thin smile. I emptied the bowl, folded it, and tucked it away. Thanks for the water, I said, turning to leave. As we moved away, raised voices snagged my attention. It was the same waitress, whose name tag I now saw read Nessa, standing her ground against 5 of the snarling tigers. I told you yesterday, your colors aren't welcome here anymore, she said, her voice trembling but firm. After what happened last time, the boss said you're banned. The leader, a hulk with a shaved head and dead eyes, took a step forward. Move, sweetheart. Or we move you! His voice was a low growl, an engine idling on the edge of violence. I stopped, my body tensing. My hand hovered near my jacket. Intervening was a bad idea. It would draw attention, create complications, blow my cover on the Finch case. But watching them menace this woman, who had shown a moment of kindness to my dog, scraped against something fundamental in me. Before I could make a decision I'd regret, a half dozen of the other bikers, the unaffiliated ones, materialized from the bar. They didn't say a word, just formed a silent, solid wall between Nessa and the tigers. It was a clear message. The tigers, outnumbered and outweighed by men who just wanted to drink in peace, backed off, muttering threats that poisoned the air. Violence averted, but the air was still charged. I knew this wasn't over. It was a turf dispute simmering to a boil. Mindful of Buddy and the promise I'd made to the film's dog keeper to keep him safe, I made a strategic retreat. We melted back into the quieter streets, the tension from the bar clinging to me like the humidity. Several blocks later, the city's anger seemed to recede. We found a small cafe with a shaded patio, a quiet island in the sea of urban noise. Wrought iron tables were scattered beneath a canopy of string lights, a touch of misplaced whimsy. I chose a corner table, unclipped Buddy's leash, and patted the seat next to me. Up you get, pal. You earned it. With a soft grunt, he hopped onto the chair, settling himself with a dignity that shamed most of the city's human inhabitants. A waitress named Maggie approached, her smile genuine. She cooed over Buddy, her professionalism melting away in the face of his quiet charm. He's well behaved. I hope it's all right, I said. As long as he doesn't order the most expensive thing on the menu. He's our favorite customer, she laughed. What can I get for you, gentlemen? Coffee? Black? Steak sandwich? And a side of unsalted grilled steak for my partner here. Buddy's ears perked at the word steak. Maggie winked. One special order for the distinguished gentleman. Coming right up. As she turned, she hesitated. Be careful around here today. There's a bad element stirring up trouble down the street. I noticed, I said. The tigers. Her eyes widened slightly. You know them. They've been getting worse. Used to be just loud. Now they're mean. She shook her head and walked inside. As we waited, I pulled out the file for my case. Photos of Genevieve Finch meeting the professor, transcripts of banal phone calls about French literature. It was all smoke. I made myself eat when the food arrived. Adrenaline burns fuel, and I had a feeling I'd need it. Buddy, for his part, devoured his steak with gusto. I watched him, a slow burn of anger coiling in my gut. The biker's threat from earlier wasn't idle pub talk. It was a promise. I finished my sandwich, glancing at my watch. The break was almost over. I had to get back to the film set, back to the illusion. Gotta head back, pal, I told Buddy. I need to use the facilities. You wait here. I reclipped his leash to the heavy leg of the wrought iron table. I caught Maggie's eye. Mind keeping an eye on him? Just for a minute. Of course, she said with a warm, reassuring smile. The restroom was in the back. A short line of people were waiting. My gut churned with a sudden, inexplicable unease. I shouldn't leave him. It was a stupid thought. He was on a crowded patio, watched by a friendly waitress. He was safe. But the feeling persisted, a cold knot of dread, a whisper of instinct I had learned long ago to ignore at my peril. The line moved at a glacial pace, 10 minutes, an eternity. When I finally emerged and stepped back onto the patio, my blood ran cold. Buddy was at the table, alone, but he was in agony. He was choking, his body convulsing, his paws scrabbling at his throat. Panic, cold and sharp, tried to take hold. I shoved it down. "Water!" I yelled, my voice cracking. "I need water, now!" A younger waitress, not Maggie, rushed over with a bottle. I forced some of the water down Buddy's throat, trying to help him clear the obstruction. He gave a final, desperate heave and swallowed. The immediate choking stopped, but he was far from okay. His eyes were unfocused, his tail limp. He looked drunk, poisoned. Maggie rushed back out then, her face pale. "I'm so sorry. The kitchen had an emergency." The other waitress, whose name tag read Lila, wrung her hands. "A man was here," she said, her voice a nervous squeak. "He seemed friendly. He said he was a friend of yours. He fed the dog a piece of sausage." I thought, "Describe him," I demanded, my voice raw. Each word a piece of gravel. "Bearded, a bit chubby, a mohawk, wearing a leather vest with a tiger on it." The pieces slammed into place. The threat, the sausage, deliberate, calculated. "Is there a vet nearby?" I asked, my voice dangerously calm. 3 blocks, Maggie said, pointing. "Left at the next corner. Blue Cross sign." I threw a wad of cash on the table, more than enough to cover the bill. As I stood to untie the leash, Buddy's legs gave out. He collapsed onto the flagstones, a distressed whimper escaping his throat. There was no time to walk. Without a second thought, I scooped all 70 pounds of him into my arms. The weight was immense, but adrenaline is a powerful fuel. With a curt nod to the stunned waitresses, I broke into a run, his limp body a dead weight against my chest. I ran through the streets of Brooklyn, a desperate man, praying he wasn't too late. The veterinary clinic was a sterile white oasis in the grimy city. I burst through the doors, shouting for help. A veterinarian, a calm woman named Dr. Harper, took control immediately. "On the table!" she commanded. I laid Buddy down gently. He was barely conscious. "What happened?" she asked, her hands already flying over him, checking his vitals. I gave her the clipped professional version. Possible poisoning. A man fed him a sausage. The man had threatened us earlier. Member of a biker gang called the Snarling Tigers. Her face was grave. Symptoms are consistent. Dilated pupils, tachycardia, neurological distress. "We need to run a tox screen now." She barked orders to a nurse. "Start him on activated charcoal and an IV drip. We need to flush his system." I could only nod. "Do whatever it takes. I'll cover it." I was ushered into the waiting room, the smell of antiseptic and fear filling my lungs. As I sat there, the adrenaline began to fade, replaced by a hollow dread. A memory surfaced, unbidden. The night I found him. The rain had been relentless, a curtain of gray misery. He was just a pup, shivering, tied to a fence with a frayed piece of rope, so thin and weak he couldn't even stand. He hadn't barked or growled, just watched me with those big, terrified eyes, expecting another blow. It had taken me an hour, sitting in the cold mud just to get him to take a piece of jerky from my hand. He had been a victim then, and now, because of me, he was a victim again. The thought ignited the cold fury I'd suppressed earlier, transforming it into a white-hot, focused rage. This wasn't a random act of cruelty. This was an attack. They had targeted my dog to get to me. They had crossed a line that didn't exist for most people, but for me, it was the only line that mattered. I'd always tried to keep my work separate from my life, to keep the darkness I waded through from seeping under my own door. They had just kicked that door down. At 1:42 p.m., Dr. Harper came out. Her expression was serious. "The blood tests are back," she said, sitting beside me. "It's bad. We found a high concentration of a powerful opioid, likely fentanyl mixed with brodifacoum. That's a superwarfarin, an anticoagulant, the main ingredient in second-generation rat poison." Rat poison. The word echoed in the sterile silence. They hadn't just wanted to make him sick. They wanted him to die, slowly and horribly, bleeding internally. "The good news," she continued, seeing the look on my face, "is that we caught it very early. The charcoal is helping, and we've started him on the vitamin K antidote for the poison. He's stable, but he'll need to be monitored for at least 24, maybe 48 hours. The film's dog keeper arrived then, looking frantic. I filled him in, my voice a low monotone. As I spoke, the decision crystallized in my mind. "I have to go," I said, standing up. "Can you stay with him?" "Of course, Mr. Reeves. But where are you going?" My expression hardened. "To settle something." I turned back to Dr. Harper. "Send me the bill. Everything." I handed the leash and the silicone bowl back to the keeper. "I'll be back," I promised. It wasn't a promise to him. It was a promise to Buddy. I walked out of the clinic and back into the suffocating heat, but I didn't feel it anymore. There was a block of ice in my chest where my heart should be. This wasn't about revenge. Revenge was messy, emotional. This was about balancing the books. It was about justice, and I knew exactly where to find it. Iron and Ash. I didn't go in. A direct confrontation was stupid. I was a detective, not a brawler. I found a vantage point in a shadowy doorway across the street, and I watched. The snarling tigers were there, bolder now, practically owning the place. I saw them shove past a terrified-looking male employee I recognized from the cafe. Nessa, the waitress with the kind smile, was gone. The employee came out to sweep the entrance, his hands shaking. I crossed the street, melting out of the shadows. "Rough crowd," I said, my voice casual. He jumped, his eyes wide with a flicker of recognition. "You have no idea," he mumbled. "Nessa, the waitress who works the door. They put her in the hospital this morning. Cornered her on her way to work." My blood ran colder. This was a systematic campaign of terror. "How long has this been going on?" I asked, keeping my voice low. He flinched. "Months. Gets worse every week. Last month they broke my nose for cutting one of them off." He looked over his shoulder, his fear a palpable thing. "The boss knows where I live. I can't just quit." I looked through the grimy windows of the bar. The tigers were starting fights, intimidating the few regular patrons left. This was an infection, and it was spreading. Direct action was a fool's game. But I had other tools. I had a name. "I know someone who can help," I said to the kid. "Someone who can end this. Just stay out of the way." I stepped back into the shadows and pulled out my phone. I didn't dial 911. I dialed a direct line, a number I hadn't used in 2 years, not since a case involving a Russian diplomat and a missing Rembrandt had gotten messy. "Morrison," a gruff voice answered. "Hank, it's Reeves," I said, my voice low and urgent. "I'm calling in that favor. I've got a situation in Brooklyn Heights. A biker gang called the Snarling Tigers. They're running an intimidation racket out of a bar called Iron and Ash. Assault, extortion, and they're distributing. They just poisoned my dog with a fentanyl-laced sausage as a message. I need a tactical unit, and I need it quiet." There was a pause on the line. "Your dog, is he? He'll live. They won't." The words came out colder than I intended, a shard of the ice in my chest. "Understood, Keanu. Don't engage what we're on our way." The sirens never sounded. 3 unmarked black vans and 2 patrol cars slid to a halt around the block, out of sight. A tactical team, clad in black, moved with a silent, fluid grace. They breached the bar from the front and back simultaneously. It was over in 90 seconds. I watched from my doorway as they brought them out, one by one, their swagger gone, replaced by the sullen shock of a predator that has suddenly found itself in a cage. They found the stash in the back room, kilos of it. The rat poison was in a locker belonging to a man with a mohawk and a scar over his right eye. As they loaded the last of them into a van, I stepped out of the shadows. I found myself face to face with the one who had kicked Buddy. His eyes widened as he recognized me, the man from the cafe. A flicker of fear, then rage. "You know," I said, my voice soft enough that only he and the cop holding his arm could hear, "there's a line from a script I was reading. You don't mess with a man's dog." I let the words hang in the air. This isn't a movie, this is real life. And actions have consequences. "I hope that Mutt died," he spat, struggling against the officer's grip. My face remained a mask of stone. He didn't. And now, you'll have plenty of time to sit in a cell and think about why hurting an innocent creature for sport was the worst mistake of your life. I turned and walked away, not looking back, as the van door slammed shut, sealing him in with his failure. The weight on my shoulders felt a little lighter. I walked back to the clinic, the city lights beginning to blur against the deepening twilight. Dr. Harper met me with a tired smile. "He's responding well. The antidotes are working. He's a fighter." She led me to his enclosure. He was hooked up to monitors and IVs, but when he saw me, his tail gave a weak, hopeful thump, thump, thump against the soft bedding. I knelt down, pressing my forehead against the cool glass of the enclosure door. "Hey, pal," I whispered, a lump forming in my throat. "You're okay. I got him. I got the bad guys." The local news on the small TV in the reception area was already reporting on the raid. A major drug bust, the end of the snarling tiger's reign of terror. My name was never mentioned. Hank was good at his job. I stayed until they closed, then walked back to my empty second-story office. The film set below was dark and silent. The Finch case felt a million miles away, a triviality from another lifetime. I poured 2 fingers of bourbon into a glass and sat in my chair, looking at the empty spot in the corner where Buddy's bed lay. The city was still a monster, still full of darkness. But tonight, I had pushed a little bit of it back into the shadows. And tomorrow, I would go and bring my partner home. For the first time in a long time, my office didn't feel like a cage. It felt like a waiting room.